Breaking news, rock stars. iZotope and Native Instruments have just released Music Production Suite 6, which includes an impressive collection of their best plugins and modules for production, mixing, and mastering. Ozone 11 Advanced helps you create professional quality masters from your mixes. I use Ozone all the time for mastering, and it's so easy to make my mixes sound like a finished record. Nectar 4 Advanced will help you get an instant vocal sound for music, dialogue, or rap vocals, with everything you need from auto level and tuning to EQ, compression, de-essing, effects, and harmony all in one easy plugin. I'm using Nectar right now to mix this vocal. And Guitar Rig 7 Pro brings you a massive collection of classic-sounding guitar pedals, amps, and cabinets for instant, amazing guitar tones. Plus, there are many more great plugins included like RX and Neutron, and they all have the Smart Assistant built into it, so you can quickly get a great sound and then adjust it to your taste. Just go to iZotope.com and remember to use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off. This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, iZotope, Atom Audio, Lewitt, and Spectra 1964. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX110D mic pre and C610 complementer with iZotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
Just to be able to fiddle around and do things for friends, especially friends who don't have a music video budget and big stakes behind their music video, you can just spend a day with them kind of messing around and learning things and seeing what works and what doesn't, and just experimenting. And I find experimenting from a place of not really knowing everything technical, it's the same in the studio, often yields some results that are really interesting and creative.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Howdy, rock stars. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars. My secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is an awesome guest. This is Hugh Macdonald, aka Fairhazel, a British South African singer-songwriter, artist, and producer born in Brighton but raised in London, Cape Town, and Paris. Hugh left Berklee College of Music in Boston in 2018, returning to London to work with Communion Music under the name Fairhazel, releasing his first single, 7 by 7 in February of 2018 to critical acclaim. Roisin O'Connor of The Independent described it as having, quote, tender whispering vocals that recall the likes of Villagers, Ben Howard, and Sufjan Stevens. You know what's funny, Hugh? When I was reading that, now I see Villagers as capitalized. I was trying to picture these villagers living with quiet voices in a village somewhere. That's great. Hugh's music is inspired by artists France Gall, Harry Nilsson, and Andy Shauf, among others. Fairhazel has established himself as a musical storyteller, blurring the lines between fiction and true stories. I think that's true. At his Los Angeles studio, he works on creating all aspects of his music himself, from songwriting to arrangement, production, and engineering. He also frequently produces and mixes music, primarily rock, folk, jazz, pop, and soul. But I love that you said primarily. That's like all of them. Although Fairhazel is a solo venture, a band often accompanies him at shows, and he has opened for Agnes Obel, Banfi and Astræa. Recently, he played Whispering Bob Harris's Under the Apple Tree and was featured thrice on the lineup of the Counting Crows Underwater Sunshine Festival. Congrats, man. As well as the Fairhazel Project, Hugh runs a monthly live music event with his wife, Danielle, soon to be growing into a day-long monthly festival. That's great. Hugh and Danielle also direct, shoot, and edit music videos for independent artists. Now, I met Hugh back in 2019 when an email came into my inbox saying that he was a big fan of the podcast and he was curious about my Stereo Sessions events at the Toy Box. And I wasn't doing those any longer, but Hugh came through Nashville at a young, budding 21 years old. And I was super impressed with his Instagram and the music that he was creating, which we'll talk about. And I offered to do a live stream for our YouTube channel. So Hugh joined me in the studio, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes, where Hugh wrote a song on the spot using lyrics that came in from you, the rock stars, in the comments of the live video. And everything was recorded on the Roswell Pro Audio Delphos and Colaris microphones. And Hugh has since worked with me for, I believe, 2 years we did it, right, Hugh?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. At NAMM in Anaheim, California, Hugh was my head videographer for those events. So I'm really excited to have him here. Please welcome Hugh Macdonald, a.k.a. Fairhazel, to Recording Studio Rockstars. Hugh, are you ready to rock?
I've been ready for a long time.
You were ready with that first email back in 2019, right?
Yeah, I remember I was at Berklee College of Music, and I was in like a basement apartment with two friends, and my friend would always be listening to this podcast, and I'd like walk by and I'd just like hear like inspirational snippets of recording advice. I'd be like, what is this? And eventually he put me onto the podcast, and when I emailed you and I got to come over, that was like meeting like my celebrity hero at the time.
That's hilarious. That's how I feel now that I'm interviewing you, man.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So I love hearing backstories like that. When you started listening, when did you find were the good times? Where would you listen? Were you driving and listening? Were you riding the subway, or did you just like pause what you're doing and listen to a podcast?
I would be, I took a study abroad semester in Valencia, Spain at the Berklee campus. And like in the Boston campus, they don't let you freely use the recording studios, but in Spain, you can just book them for as many hours as you want at any time of day or night. And I remember I would like prep, like I didn't really know what I was doing, but I would like prep my sessions by just like listening to your podcasts all day long and like writing down any words of wisdom that people had. And I would just like go in the studio alone and just like plug things in and mess with things based on like the notes that I had taken from.
That's incredible, dude. Any chance you can send me those notes in case I forgot what they said myself?
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. So you were doing the Berklee program, and did you go as part of their recording program, or did you go as a musician, studying an instrument, or is that automatically both if you go there?
You have to have an instrument to audition with and to get in, but then I did what they call professional music, which is like you get to pick modules from any of the degrees that they offer. So I did like a bit of business, a bit of songwriting, and a bit of audio engineering.
Right on. And then did you ever have the Professor Pat Pattison when you were at Berklee? He
I knew
taught, you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I learned a lot about song lyric writing from him, but I'm probably going to learn more from you. So
I don't think so, but yeah, I've heard great things about him, but I never had him.
So, Rockstars, I'm going to preface this a little bit more by reminding you that we have a playlist of Fairhazel music in the show notes. So please go listen. Maybe not right this sec, but go mark it and make sure you come back to it. Save that playlist. It's so good. Like when I was listening to it, I was really struck by it. I mean, of course, I get enthusiastic before interviews, but I'm like thinking this is some of the best music that we've had on the show. So it's really cool to finally be able to talk about how you're doing all this stuff. For me, of course, I picked up on the Harry Nilsson influence. There's a lot of that songwriter, 70s. I don't know if it's fair to say Brit influenced or whatever, but it's the songwriter influence. It's the fun kind of. There's a free for all aspect to the music that you create, and there's an element that is very. It's very dynamic and expressive, and there's almost a show tune element to it too. Although that might be the wrong term because that evokes Broadway imagery too.
No, but I think maybe the common theme there is like, especially with those 70s songwriters, is they just didn't seem to take themselves too seriously, and that like even like Lime and the Coconut.
Yeah,
you're not going to write that if you're taking yourself too seriously, and I just feel like that's a good way to make music and not get too hung up on like having it be perfect and everything else.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I remember my introduction to Lime and the Coconut, I think, was probably like one of those K-Tel album commercials on TV back in the 80s, which was only a 10-year throwback at that point or less, And I was like, what's that all Lime and the Coconut? And I didn't know what anything meant. And then the Harry Nilsson documentary film came out in the 2000s, I think it was. And that was my real introduction to who he was. Of course, I knew his songs from Urban Cowboy from the film, but didn't know that I knew his songs at that point.
He's so good. Like I feel like that's probably the case with a lot of people. Like One Is the Loneliest Number and Without You and Everybody's Talking. Those songs, just like when you hear them, you realize that they've kind of been embedded in your brain for a while, but maybe you don't know who wrote them more.
Yeah, so then that led me to discover The Arrow and the movie The Point that he did with Ringo. And it was just like, it was really cool. It was very mind-blowing to me. It's so much fun when and what's funny is, I'm talking about, I was in my late 40s at this point,
Right.
So, I mean, like, it took me a minute to discover these things. But what I love about music is when we open a door to a part of the music scene we haven't opened the door to yet. And all of a sudden it's just like this whole world of sounds and world of musical styles. And you discover the whole history of all the people involved. And then in your brain, you connect the dots between like, and then they worked with so-and-so, and I knew about this other person over here, and so it's really fun. I'm sure you're going through a lot of that these days.
Yeah, the weird story about Harry Nilsson was that I had never heard of him, and I was visiting LA in 2018 for the first time, and I was in an Uber and somehow got around to playing like my songs for the Uber driver, and he was like, "Oh, this reminds me of Harry Nilsson," and I didn't know who that was, and I was on my way to meet a friend of a friend at his studio, and when I got there, he was like, "Oh, this was a studio that John Lennon, Bob Dylan, and Harry Nilsson built together in Santa Monica." And I was like, whoa, I've never heard of this guy, and he's come up twice, and now I'm in his building. And that night, like, I just put on all of his music and fell asleep to it, and I was like, wow, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard.
Oh, and that's how you got as good as you are at what you do, is that's the secret, is you pick a record and put on the music and fall asleep to it, and then you wake up and you know everything.
Exactly, yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds like it sounds like the backstory of a Homer Simpson episode, like learning another language. Yeah. Or no, I know what I'm thinking of. In Homestar Runner, which was this great online cartoon back in the early 2000s, the coach couldn't say the word job. He could only say Georb. And so then they made fun of him. They tried to train him, or maybe he tried to train himself how to learn how to say it. And so he put the headphones on and he just listened to job playing over and over in his headphones while he slept. And then he woke up and couldn't say other words. Exactly. Well, all right, cool. So then two other artists that were in your intro, France Gall and Andy Shauf, or Shauf, I don't know how you pronounce that. But I didn't know about them, so I went and listened, and they're very cool. And Andy's stuff really reminded me closely. You guys have very similar voices in a way, too.
Yeah, I actually, I hadn't heard his stuff, and then I started to listen, and I was like, well, this guy sounds exactly like me, but just has it nailed.
He's just got a different name.
But he's amazing. Yeah, I think he records everything, or most things, at home himself, plays everything, which was a big inspiration for me. And yeah, his music, if you haven't heard it, people out there listening, it's definitely worth checking out. And the music videos are very weird, so it's worth watching them as well.
Yeah, I didn't see the videos yet, so I'll have to go check that out. I mean, now, in all fairness, your music videos are really weird and really awesome. And I'm excited to talk about that stuff too, which we will. So make sure you're sticking around in this episode, podcast listeners, rock stars, because we're going to cover stuff like, the ways that you create your videos for Instagram and the ways that you're creating your YouTube videos for your music channel. I think those are really interesting topics too, because sometimes we focus on making our music and then we realize that we need to do more than just make the song and record it. We also need to do stuff like release it, put it out there, book a show, make it visually interesting too. So we'll circle back for that. So stick around, rock stars. Tell us a little bit more about, you finished at Berklee, and I think I met you pretty shortly after that, right? That was 2018. So 2019 is when we connected.
Yeah, I dropped out because of this label, Communion Records, which was like my dream label at the time. They wanted to work with me on 2 songs. And so I dropped out of Berklee to move back to the UK and work with them. And then I just really enjoyed my time in America. So I came back a lot and eventually moved here.
What do they say? Drop out, tune in, turn on, or something like that. That's the expression.
That was me. Tune in, turn on, drop out, something like that.
There you go. Awesome. Well, and then you were also doing a very cool thing. So tell us about, when I met you, you sent me a link to your Instagram, and I was like, what are these like cool, like every day it's like a cool song and an amazing animated graphic that looks like Monty Python.
Yeah, I was at the time. I've always liked setting myself challenges in like a public arena, like Instagram or something, where
like a podcast.
Yeah,
we'll make sure to set a challenge for you while you're here.
I don't know if anybody's really holding me accountable, but at least I feel like I'm being held accountable when people are seeing it. So I was doing like a song a day for a year with a little Monty Python style animation video, and I think I got to like 350 of them before I gave up. And it was pretty cool though, because like every day I have like this bank now that I can look back on of short song ideas.
So you skipped Christmas and Thanksgiving? Is that
I think that might have been it. Yeah. But yeah, I was making, some of the videos are questionable in their quality. Looking back on them, I was also learning like Photoshop for the first time, and I was doing everything on there with their frame animation tool. But yeah, it feels good to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. So maybe describe what they were. So Photoshop. So you were taking, rockstars, if you're familiar with Monty Python, you can probably picture it. But if you're not, it's a form of animation that uses, almost things that look like cut out pieces of paper. Right?
Yeah. I think originally they probably were. I was scanning magazines or finding scanned magazines online and kind of cutting out figures, sometimes cutting out my own head, little objects and whatever. And then in Photoshop, you can like animate things frame by frame. And so I would kind of build like a little scene and then move a little figure left and right, frame by frame, which took so long. It was a ridiculous way of doing things now that I look back on it. But awesome. But yeah, I felt like it was maybe closer to the original Monty Python way of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're probably, if I remember growing up and experimenting with stop motion where, we would take a Super 8 camera. I suppose we had a tripod. We might not have even had a tripod back then, We must have had something. But we'd set it up and then we'd take clay and we'd make like a dinosaur or something, and then you'd scoot it and then you like try and press the button for a short period of time and grab a little frame and move it again, make these little animations. It's really fun to do. And then, of course, like when my daughter was growing up, now they had like iPhone apps that helped you do that. And so you make your own animations. Now you probably just take a video and then it cuts out a few frames and makes it look like it was animated.
It does, yeah. It's nice though to have, like, if you're primarily a musician, it's nice to have like another thing to channel some creative energy into that's not music, so you don't get burnt out.
Yeah. Let's keep talking about that for a little bit. So like, what were places that you were getting your inspiration from when you were doing those Instagram clips? And, how did you find an idea and then just move forward with the idea?
I was kind of taking, after the first probably like 20 songs, I had run out of things to write songs about. So I would just kind of take things that would happen during the day. I remember I bought a new tambourine one day, and my song for that day was called I bought a new tambourine or something. And the visuals were definitely just 100% inspired by Monty Python. And the songs, I was using it also like at the time I didn't know, not that I know much now, but I didn't know anything about recording. Sometimes I was even just recording it into my computer microphone and mixing it in quotation marks. And I was just kind of taking inspiration from day-to-day life, but that also inspired my songwriting in a way, because now a lot of my songs are just about day-to-day happenings and people I meet and things I see. So maybe that was prepping me for something.
Yeah. I mean, were there things that you learned when you were at Berklee about songwriting that you could share with us, or about, how to find ideas? Because I feel like what do you feel like is one of the biggest challenges to songwriting? Do you think it's just not knowing what the hell to write about?
I think there's definitely always something to write. The thing I found at Berklee was that, like in my lyric writing classes especially, that there's no, I would bring in lyrics, or I remember my wife often would bring in lyrics, and our lyrics would be like shot down, whereas somebody would bring in lyrics that I would hear and think like, oh, these are a bit just like not very inventive. And they would be praised. And I remember we were told one time that we were pointed to like a more stereotypically like maybe country, pop country set of lyrics, and they were like, this is what's going to sell. And then they pointed to like mine or my wife's lyrics, and they said, this is not going to reach a wide audience. And I just felt
we'll show them, man. We'll show them.
We'll show them. I think what I learned is that just do whatever you want to do and what feels good, and give zero attention to trying to craft anything around what you think people will enjoy.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thought. So like, you could have said to your professor, have you ever heard of Harry Nilsson, by the way?
Right. If I brought those lyrics in without him knowing, he'd probably have shot them down and thought that they were too weird or...
Possible, yeah. And then, I remember, okay, so sue me, I name drop, but I remember doing a session with Steve Albini. Hi, Steve. And he said to us at one point, he just gave us the advice, like, don't try and make a record that you think other people are going to want to listen to. You can't, it's a recipe for failure. You can't do that. It won't succeed. Don't try and make a record that you think the labels will want. Well, in all fairness, there's probably areas where that is true. Right. Like if you're cranking out music every day for instrumental things for placement, you might want to put it in a certain genre because that's what they need. But, I think for creative to do your own things too, it's like, I like hearing you say that, because I believe that our strongest offering as an artist is that thing that is just true to us. And it's so hard to learn, and it's so hard to remember, and it's so hard to stick to that sometimes. For me, it is. Seems to be pretty easy for you.
No, especially when I listen to like music that's coming out, that's doing very well, I kind of get caught up in thinking that I have to imitate that. But then it's like, if you as an artist like what you're doing and it's what you feel you're authentically making, then surely there's at least one other person in the world who likes the same kind of thing and is into the same kind of thing. And if you've got 100 people who like the same kind of thing, then you've got a show.
Nice, man. I can't wait for your retrospective autobiography to come out, My Audience of One. My studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go look at the Mini Stack STX, Thunderbay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. All right, so you saw a lot of other people doing stuff, trying to like follow the formula, so to speak. But yet, in the same way, your music has a formulaic quality to it. In that, I can clearly hear that on different recordings, you're going for something. You're going for a certain kind of a style or a certain kind of way of putting a song together. Talk a little bit more about that. I mean, because you mentioned being influenced by Harry Nilsson. Or no, when it was but the Instagram stuff, the clips, like it's purely Monty Python. What about those times? Like, do you find that you discover something and it's just like, boom, make a lot of that. And then when we get bored with it, it's like, cool, I found this now, go make a lot of that, or what?
Definitely. I find that especially with production, like a lot of the new folk stuff that's coming out, the production is like borrowing, I feel like, a lot from pop and those like very like well-produced pop songs. And that's the kind of thing that I'm like, oh, I need to listen to this. I need to take like maybe elements that are not songwriting from other genres, like production and things that they might be doing, drum sampling and drum production and vocal production, and merge that with the genre that I feel comfortable and safe in, which would be like folk indie stuff, and see what can be created. And there's two people that come to mind. There's a Korean artist called Mid-Air Thief, and he has a song called These Chains that if you have like a nice pair of headphones or a pair of speakers, you should put that song on after this podcast, because it's like a very simple folk song, but the production is so mind-blowing and so like granular that it's very inspirational to hear like new ways of producing old music.
Right on. Very cool. All right. Well, we're gonna dive into a little bit more about your studio too, but let's take a moment and give a little bit of a background too. So Rockstars, as I mentioned, I think it was 2019. No, it must have been 2019 when I was getting ready to go do NAMM. I'm a little confused about the dates because I thought I also got your email in 2019, but I decided I wanted to go there and I wanted to do some video production. And so I sent out an email to all of you saying, look, I'm looking for a couple of people who might like to go in an intern capacity just to go to this, coolest event, which is the NAMM conference. And we'll have a chance to go out there and, see all the new things that are there and just hang out for a couple of days. So then I got an email from you, and then I also got an email from Micah. And the two of you said, we would love to go do that with you. So, that was the first time we did it. More recently, we did another one in, so I guess the first one was 2020, and then more recently or maybe the second one was 2020. I'm butchering this part. But with Mahima, we did it again. And it was just really awesome. We got to go kick around NAMM and go to all the booths. And, I'm trying to like connect with these different companies and make videos for the YouTube to just send to you Rockstars. And Hugh graciously was doing all the camera work for that and making sure that we got that production done. So thank you so much for doing that. Both of you, all of you guys.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience, because that was like, my wife always jokes like, while other people might be walking in on like their husbands looking at naked ladies on their computer, anytime she walks in and I'm like on my computer, I'm watching like videos of gear or videos of plugins.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was like I was in a candy shop in that place, and I got to meet so many cool people. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite parts about that too is I remember as we were running around doing all this stuff, and I just said to you at one point, to you and Micah, I said, I don't remember what the context was, but I was just like, hey guys, I'm like mentally maxed out trying to do these and interact and do the videos. And if you guys don't mind, just the big favor for me is just your job hopefully is to make sure I don't walk off a cliff. And then that very night, there was some like major screw up with the video that was getting published or the title or something like that. And you jumped in and fixed it and literally saved me from walking off a cliff. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm glad. Yeah, it's hard out there, especially like there's no internet because there's so many people. And yeah, that was intense, but very fun.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed going to NAMM Rockstars. If you get a chance to go to that or just pretty much any of the events, I really recommend it because it's just awesome to be in this huge community of people bustling around and and all the different companies that show up and, seeing the latest, greatest microphones and stuff like that. So that's how Hugh and I know each other pretty well, is from all that stuff. And then I think we've done a little bit of work. Hugh, you've also worked on the podcast for us with some video editing and other things like that. What's some of the stuff that you've done for Recording Studio Rockstars?
I remember editing quite a few unboxing videos in 2020. I think that's mainly when I was working on the video stuff. So I guess any video edits that came out in that year, I might have had a hand on. And then I think that was maybe my only...
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you helped with a bunch of video production and then you started getting slammed busy because you're just producing so much cool music. So thank you for your help on that again.
Of course.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your studio. You're joining us from your home studio now, right?
Yeah, I am.
And what's the mic you're talking to us on? It looks pretty fancy.
This mic I just got. This is my first time plugging it in, actually. This is a Singular Audio F48. I believe it's from the Netherlands. It's like a boutique, one guy who makes it. And I've been basically inspired by us at NAMM and seeing like all these cool ways to kind of get involved in like the sponsorship side of gear. I have been reaching out to quite a few companies ever since then, and kind of offering a trade where I'll make videos either that I post on my social media or for them to post on their social media, in exchange for like a free microphone or a free piece of whatever. And so this is the second microphone company I've done this with, or the third actually, where I'm doing a series on TikTok and Instagram where it's like I'll record an entire short song with one microphone and I'm doing 10 videos. So I haven't started that yet with Singular Audio, but my first impressions of this mic are very nice indeed.
That's very cool. And just in all fairness, I'm going to say that you're not getting a free microphone. That's you're working.
No. I'm working for it.
Good stuff.
It feels free though.
Yeah, right. So wait, what is that? What does that microphone sound like? It's a cardioid pickup. Is that right?
It's a cardioid. There's a switch, weirdly enough, inside, so you have to take it apart to make it omni. But I believe it's based. Let me get my facts straight here. I believe it's based on a U48 or it's a K47 capsule. And so it's kind of smooth top end and rich. And compared to the other condenser I have here, which is a Vanguard V4, who I met at NAMM as well.
Right.
That one is very like crispy on the high end. This one, from my first podcast usage of it, feels very like rich and deep. Nice.
Well, it's really fun to experiment with different mics and stuff. What does it sound like if you sort of talk on different sides of that mic? Maybe I wonder if we can hear the rejection.
Yeah, I'll go around. I'm going around to the left side now. And I'm gone.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Awesome, dude. Well, let's see. What else? Anything else you want to say about that particular mic? Where can Rockstars go check that out? Well, I guess your videos are coming soon, right?
My videos are coming soon. Probably they're probably out by now. But I would definitely check out. I love kind of smaller companies making cool products. So I would check out Singular Audio. It's very affordable for a microphone of this quality.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then the Vanguard mic. So I'm looking at your YouTube channel right now, and you've got some cool shorts started there. And Rockstars, one of these is really good. It's called Rare Music Gear I Found. And we're going to hopefully put a link to that in the show notes too, because you did this hilarious demonstration of getting a great kind of Leslie sound for your guitar. which is really cool. But then the other one, you did a tribute to Burt Bacharach, which sounds gorgeous. And that one is the Vanguard.
That is the Vanguard. Most of the Vanguard videos of me are on their TikTok, the Vanguard Audio Labs TikTok. But yes, I have a Vanguard V4 condenser, and that is just amazing. I love it so much.
Right on. Yeah, I love the Vanguard stuff. I'm using the stereo mic all the time on my drum recordings.
Oh, nice. Well. I've been interested in that one.
Shout out to Derek. All right, cool. So let's keep jumping forward here. Tell us a little bit more about your studio. So what kind of a size is your home studio? And then what are the tools that you're surrounded by? By the way, I don't know if you can see it in the back, but we have matching IKEA shelves on the wall right now. I think
we do. Videos. Wow, nice. Yeah, IKEA is great. Okay, so I have one room that's fairly small, which is the control room, but it's where I end up doing most of the time. I'm just recording myself, or my wife's recording herself. So this is where we end up doing most things. And then in the living room, which is much bigger, we have like a drum kit, piano, all this stuff, and occasionally we'll bring some mics out there and record if we're recording bands or whatever. But for the most part, we're in here, and in here I have quite a lot of gear. Right now, a friend of mine has been very generous to lend me his rack, which has some warm audio preamps, compressors, a nice Cytec preamp rack,
oh, cool.
Neve preamps. It's a dream come true.
And then did you say, and what DAW do you like to work with when you're recording?
Reaper, actually.
Really? Okay, cool. We're going to want to hear about that. What got you interested in using Reaper?
At Berklee, I was taught on Pro Tools, and I was just getting frustrated with even the fact that I would have to pay to contact support and the upgrade costs and everything. And so I switched over to Logic for a while, which was okay, which I still use for like things I'm doing quickly. And the MIDI capabilities on that are awesome. But Reaper, the fact that it's free or $60 and the level of kind of customization that you can achieve with it is just incredible to me. And so, like, I've got it mapped in a way where if I make a new track and I title that track lead vocals, it'll automatically color it. It'll automatically group it in the lead vocal grouping area. And there's all these like things that, especially if you know coding, which I don't, but I can copy other people's codes from Reddit or whatever. You can get so deep with the customization that you can make it be however you want. You can make it look like Logic. You can make it look like and act like Pro Tools, import all the key commands, and it's just fantastic.
That's super cool to hear, man. We've had John Tidy on the podcast when I think he was telling us about his site, Reaper blog.
Yes.
And he, I remember learning that Reaper is incredibly flexible. You can even edit video directly within Reaper, I think, along with your audio, right?
I've never done that, but I've definitely seen that when I've tried to import like audio from a video. It's a pretty amazing program.
And so when you talk about it automatically coloring a track and all that, that's what you would consider a macro?
I guess so. Yeah. You can basically, anything you can think of, there's a way to kind of implement it into Reaper. And that's just one of the things that stands out to me as I love like an unorganized session just breaks my brain. So having that feature where I can, and it like can also sometimes recognize, like I have it mapped so I could type lead vocals, or I could type Vox, or I could type BGVs for backing vocals, and all of those things will color the right color I want them and put them in the place that I want them.
Okay, so if you type in BGV, you already have some tracks selected, and then you type that in and it colors them and organizes them in a way that you want?
Yeah, so it'll put them like under my harmonies, in the area that my harmonies are in. It'll route them to my harmony bus. The other thing I love is that there's no difference between tracks. Like you just create a track, and then whatever you do to it is what it adapts to. So like if you were creating a track that you wanted to run a MIDI keyboard through and put a virtual instrument on, it's all the same process. But as soon as you put on like that VST plugin, and
it becomes a MIDI track.
It becomes a MIDI track, which it just takes away like one level of thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, man. I love anything that removes the obstacle of having to be an engineer when you're trying to be an artist, trying to be creative.
It's awesome.
Because that stuff really trips you up. What are some things in your experience? Share some stories about like, maybe a nightmare story with trying to be the songwriter, creative, be Fairhazel, but instead it wants you to be Hugh the engineer.
Yeah, I think it's just like, it's when troubleshooting gets in the way. Like sometimes I'll be in here and I have a great idea and I'll be like, okay, I need to get this down now because it's going to lose the magic the longer I wait. And then, especially like back in my Pro Tools days, there'd just be some like obstacle or something that seems like the gods of Pro Tools or whatever DAW are just putting on me that are stopping me from being able to just instantly hit record and go. And in Logic, there's certain things that drive me crazy. But in Reaper, I just find that, like, for the most part, it never crashes. It's never crashed once while I've used it. And it's using the plugin so much more efficiently to where I'm never having CPU overloads and having to be like, oh, damn, let me put my idea on pause and freeze some tracks or bounce them out. And so that's what's great about it to me.
That's huge, because that is a real pain in the ass with recording. And I've been there before where it's like the maybe a Pro Tools, if I'm using a Pro Tools session, which is usually the case for me, it runs out of juice and then I can't even get more tracks going. And so you're like trying to bounce sessions back into other sessions and stuff.
Right.
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs. Whether you're setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. I remember another thing that one of the apps that I used from iZotope, Spire Studio, had this feature that I really appreciated, where if I was recording myself, if I was recording acoustic, for example, I make a mistake and then I might be able to go back and listen to it and identify the spot that I need to pick up and keep playing.
Yeah.
But then it was like, if I had to then think about like, oh, I should turn on pre-roll and put it in 2 extra bars and then press the right button and then it'll, go into record. It was like too much engineering for me to, like, by that time I couldn't remember what I was doing.
Right.
And so it had a feature where you just hit stop and then you just hit the record button and it automatically would back up and drop into record and keep going. So it's like you could almost get musical with it. And that was great for me. I remember also seeing Joe Gilder talk about designing something on his channel for Studio One like that, where it would automatically back up and then just keep playing and drop into record from there and go.
Yeah.
Or, while he was rolling, he could just back it up and keep it going. So what are things like that you find useful? Because like if you're playing acoustic, you don't have many hands left over for pushing buttons on the keyboard, right?
One thing, maybe it's not directly related to that, but that came to mind that has been so useful and saved me so much time is in Reaper, you can activate spectral peaks. So the waveform becomes like a color spectrum, and you can then open up a window that shows you like this color spectrum. And so let's say you're de-essing with a plugin or something and you have to target a frequency. You can zoom in to the waveform and it'll be clear that every S is red. And then you open up the spectral peaks thing and you refer to where red is on the frequency chart. And you see that red is 7,000 hertz or whatever. And then you instantly know that's where your S's are. And you can also see what's clashing. Like if bass and kick are taking up too much of the same space, you can see that they're both predominantly yellow. And then you can reference the spectral spectrogram thing and see where exactly frequency-wise that lies.
I love that. I mean, I think somebody needs to design the perfect DAW plugin combination where everything's based on colors. Imagine that. Imagine going from, you're looking at the color chart, you see two things clashing, and you go over to your EQ, and instead of picking a frequency, you just actually pick the color yellow on the EQ. Scoot it over to blue instead.
Be much more fun way to mix, I think.
That's cool, man. Plus it keeps everything trippy, which keeps you in the creative workflow, right? So now that also reminds me of iZotope RX, which we've been talking about a lot on the podcast, and I've been learning a lot more with it. What I enjoy about looking at the color spectrum there is, and I think I mentioned this recently on the show, is if I found an S, I could go in and I could highlight across that S and then, use the de-esser plugin just on the S and sort of extract it. But I could also go in and just grab part of the color spectrum of that S. So I could remove the lower frequencies of the S or the upper frequencies and de-ess it. Wow. And it really feels like you're getting very ninja, like you can start sculpting. Yeah. Can you do that in Reaper can you work in the color spectrum, or is that a way of viewing it and then you go back over to your plugin to do the thing?
I believe it's only a way of viewing it, but I could be wrong.
Okay, cool. Does it do things like tuning, vocal tuning, and things like that as well?
It has some plugins native to the DAW, but that's one part I would say where most of the other DAWs like Logic and Pro Tools and Studio One definitely have a leg up. Also, everything in Reaper is very, like when you first open it up, it's incredibly ugly. It looks like Windows from like the first iteration of Windows.
It looks a little bit like my OBS, which is the open broadcasting software for streaming.
So a lot of the plugins, I think some charm about like plugins that people like is how they look and whether or not they're emulating like something, the little scratches that they've put on the face of the 1176 or whatever.
Yeah.
But in Reaper, it's like no visual satisfaction whatsoever, just gray sliders. So I don't tend to use the plugins that come with it, maybe just out of prejudice of how they look.
That's funny. It's funny to know that underneath the hood of plugins is really nothing but gray sliders anyway.
Yeah.
No matter what DAW you're using. All right, so let's see. What else do we want to talk about? What about when it comes to editing in Reaper? What are some things you enjoy about just being able to edit stuff?
Let's see. I enjoy this feature where you can, within one track, like let's say you have a vocal and you're comping it. Within one track, you can, I don't even know how to explain this, but you can add multiple tracks. Like let's say you have a lead vocal track, you can add multiple clips of audio in it and they can play on top of each other. So if you wanted to process, like I don't even know.
So it's like one, but in the same way that you said a track is whatever you want it to be later.
Right.
Are you saying that a mono track suddenly becomes a blended folder track of like 5 tracks at once, just by deciding that later?
Exactly. You could just throw in other tracks into one track and it all of a sudden becomes almost like a playlist of tracks that you can play either separately or all together at the same time.
Wow.
And the routing as well it just also takes away a level of thinking in that you can just drag any track to any other track. You don't necessarily have to open up a routing matrix thing. You can just drag the lead vocal track to the reverb bus, or you could also drag like the lead vocal track, or let's say you're sidechaining a kick and a bass. You can open up whatever compressor it is, Fab Filter, whatever you've got, and you can just drag the kick track onto the plugin's interface and it routes it as a sidechain, and that's all you have to do.
That's really cool. That's super fun. And I think I remember hearing that about Reaper and being impressed with that. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, shoot, I just blanked on what I was going to ask you about. But being able to route the stuff really easily. And then I guess what I was going to ask about was when I think about the other DAWs, sometimes what's appealing is that they come with a lot of bells and whistles, like instruments. Does Reaper come with built-in instruments at all, or is that stuff you add yourself later?
That is stuff I add myself, but I do have a great suggestion for virtual instruments for anybody listening. This is life-changing. Write this down. There's this plugin or a virtual instrument called Decent Sampler, which is just like a Contact, like Shell kind of similar thing. And then it's free. And then there's a website called Piano Book. And on this website, there are thousands of sampled instruments, sometimes there's a famous felt piano that Spitfire has. The guy who sampled that felt piano for Spitfire has a lot of instruments on there. Everything is free. You can load it up into Decent Sampler or into Contact. And he's done like what he considers to be an improvement over his felt piano. And there's everything you could possibly imagine on there. There's saxophones that sound so real, or sometimes they don't sound real, but there's such a unique texture. There's an ultrasound pad I have, which is somebody sampled their ultrasound, and it's a beautiful pad. Or a sonic toothbrush pad is one I use quite a lot as well. And there's thousands of free samples, very playable, like very minute velocity mapping.
Amazing.
And that's all free. And those over any paid virtual instrument or any stock virtual instrument I've ever used, Decent Sampler and Piano Book always sound best.
That's amazing. Well, so now that, of course, is one of the advantages of using something like Reaper, is you have access to the VST for all your plugins. I'm trying to remember what our workarounds are for Pro Tools. I know Waves has the free rack now, which will host VSTs, but I think it only hosts Waves VSTs. And there might be another VST wrapper. Rockstars, if there is one, drop a comment in if you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, and let us know about the VST wrapper, or come to our Facebook group at facebook.com/recording studio rockstars group, whatever it is. If you just search for it, it's pretty obvious that it's us, and join the group, and you can interact there and stuff. Make sure you answer the 3 questions when you come over there, so we let you in and you don't get booted out with the other robots. Well, that's a great tip, dude. What an awesome thing. And, one of the fun things about approaching music the way I think you have, which is, because when you're starting, when you're young, when you're doing all this stuff, you don't have a lot of extra money to spend on it. You have to be very, very thrifty and careful about how you find things. And so it kind of forces you to dig around and look for these secret weapons like that one that you just described. So that was Decent Sampler.
Yes, and that's not limited to Reaper. You can use that on whatever DAW.
Awesome. And then another thing I was going to say about Reaper is I've heard multiple times from multiple people, I think Chris James, who's been on the show, was the first one to mention it to me, that Reaper is just simply one of the most stable options you have. If you need to record like a live concert or something like that, and you just need something that you don't have to be afraid that it might crash while you're working,
right?
Reaper's a great choice for that.
Yeah, I do record a few podcasts, and it's definitely, I can just put it on, even if it's like a 3 or 4 hour long conversation, and know that nothing's going to happen.
Tell us more about that. What does that mean for you? I record a few podcasts.
So I engineer a few at the moment, I'm only engineering one podcast, which is called You Already Know. And it's Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live and his co-host, Tani Maroli. And they have a podcast where they talk about kind of pop culture and just happenings in the world of media.
Where are those guys located? Are they somebody that you met face-to-face in LA, or is this, something you tapped into through the internet and the world of networking and connecting with people?
So the same friend who introduced me to Recording Studio Rockstars was their engineer in New York, which is where they used to record. And since then, Tani has moved to LA, and Kenan still lives in New York, but visits LA to do the podcast. And so I got the job through my friend. And so it's sometimes consistent. If Kenan's here filming TV shows or movies, it'll be consistently in LA, but I've flown over to New York to do it as well. And a lot of the time these days it's over Zoom, so I'm not really involved in the engineering process, but when it's in person, it's here in LA.
That's cool, man. What have you learned about podcast recording and editing, and what's some of the stuff you love about it, and what's some of the stuff you hate about it?
The editing side, not so much with them as I don't handle the editing, but on some other podcasts I've edited. The amount, when you're trying to get a really clean audio, the amount of people saying and that I have to go in and cut out is ridiculous. And it makes me hyper aware, even though I'm probably still failing at it, of saying that when I'm talking to people. And like going in and being meticulous about cutting out every time somebody takes too long of a break to think about something or stutters and says something twice. It really like makes you hyperanalyze the way people speak. I'm sure you know about that.
Absolutely. I remember when I started this podcast, actually when I started previous ones, because this is my 4th show by the time I started it, I noticed, I did what we all do. So I started out by recording things, and then I went through and I tried to edit everything, and then you get frustrated. And then the worst is when people start retelling stories and they go out of order, and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know how to put this together now. Or if you try and remove a large chunk, but then the storyline maybe does or doesn't flow from one place to another. And I always thought it would be fascinating to, maybe you can do it if you're in Reaper, develop a little script that actually takes all those ums and ahs that get edited out and just throws them offline into a folder that just accumulates, so that one day you could do a remix of them all, you know?
There is actually, I recently got replaced on a podcast job by an AI. This was like 2 weeks ago, because there's this new AI thing called Descript, and it does exactly that. It doesn't save all the ums and the ahs, I don't think, but it just listens through within a minute and removes and perfectly crossfades every every ah, every stutter. And it's pretty amazing. There's another very incredible free tool if you are making podcasts, which is Adobe's podcast AI thing that has just come out, where you can upload an audio recording that you've taken with your iPhone or whatever in the worst conditions outside on a windy day. And you put it through this Adobe AI website, which is free. And within 2 minutes, it spits out something that sounds like you've been recorded in like Joe Rogan's studio.
Wow.
In perfect quality, which is mind-blowing.
Should I take our voices and go throw them into the Adobe thing, just see what happens?
That might be fun. It's fun to do a test where you purposefully try and create the worst conditions possible.
Yeah, I think I saw a video of somebody demonstrating that, and they did this before and after, and I was like, oh, come on. You just, right. The after was actually your before that you just added some fake reverb to and tried it out, you know, but it's cool hearing you say that it really did work.
It really does work amazingly well.
Well, so my only take on that is if the artificial intelligence robots are going to come and try and replace us, it's like, listen, you can have my job, but can you at least come over and plant some food in the garden and then make me dinner while you're at it? Because I mean, yeah. I do need to eat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's inevitable that they're coming, so I'm ready to embrace them and use them to make my workflow quicker.
If you are mixing music, podcasts, or audio for video, and you want it to sound amazing, then iZotope has got your back. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments. From subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design, iZotope takes your music and podcast productions to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, a.k.a. the second half of the show. My guest today is Hugh Macdonald, a.k.a. Fairhazel. Are you ready to jam, dude?
I am.
All right, so lots of cool stuff to talk about. What do you like to do for recording your voice and your acoustic guitars? I know you got a new mic in front of you now, but let's talk about some of the many things that you've tried and found to work well for you.
Almost for acoustic guitars, almost always one mic. Something I really like to do is that off of Amazon or wherever else you want to go, you can get these little boundary microphones, which you can get like 4 of them for $10, and you kind of peel off a sticky back, and if you stick it onto your guitar body, it's got a little jack output. It's just kind of picking up the sound of the actual surface.
So they're sort of like piezo
Exactly.
contact mics?
Contact mics, that's probably a better word. And I like to record myself with like a very nice mic. Primarily, I've been using, up until now, the Vanguard V4 or the Sennheiser MD441. I love as well, a dynamic mic. So I'll have that like very nice professional recorded sounded thing. And then I'll run the piezo contact mic into whatever, a DI or just straight into like one of these warm audio preamps. And that will have a kind of super textural, noisy, very like intimate sound. And blending those two, I find, makes for a very, very nice, satisfying guitar sound. Also, affecting the contact mic with some weird effects is very interesting as kind of a secondary texture. And I won't always have that, but when I do, I really like it. And another thing with acoustic guitars that it takes a lot of effort, but every time I've done it has been exceptionally nice, is I think I saw this on a Reverb YouTube video, but you take your acoustic guitar, especially if it's an acoustic guitar heavy song, and you record it first at 440 hertz, tuned perfectly, and then you record, I think, 6, or I guess you could go to as many or as few as you want, 6 doubles of the guitar, but each time you detune it by 2 hertz down or 2 hertz up. So you've got like, you're recording one take at 440 hertz, one take at 438, one at 436, and then also one at 442 and 444 and 446. And it takes a lot of time and it might not be worth it. But when you do that and you put them all together, it creates this like amazing, huge kind of natural chorusy sound. I have 2 songs, or maybe one song that's out that has that effect called Carnival Lane, which probably isn't mixed to do it justice, but it creates like a huge acoustic guitar sound, and it's a really cool effect.
That's amazing, man. I've never heard anybody say that. So in the same way that we typically say, hey, take your guitar and then use a pitch shifting plugin to shift it down a few cents on one side and up a few cents on the other, you literally actually pitch shift your instrument.
Yeah, you can do that with if you just have a clip-on tuner, most of them have a feature where you can change what hertz you're tuning to. Also, if you're using pretty much any tuning plugin, like the Waves GTR tuner I use a lot, you can just input a different pitch center in there, and it's fairly easy to do. It's a lot of tuning, but if you can play to yourself pretty accurately, then it comes out sounding amazing.
That's really cool. Where did you even come up with an idea like that?
I think it was a Reverb YouTube video that was trying to emulate some Pink Floyd acoustic guitars that were recorded on like a tape that was varying in speed a little bit. And they were trying to do it for people who didn't have a tape machine that they could mess with. But every time I've done it, I've been very happy that I have.
And so you're recording, like you're playing acoustic. Are you strumming full chords and then layering it 6 more times with all these varied tunings?
Exactly, yeah. I guess any part, finger picking or strumming. The strumming, though, gives a huge feeling. So especially with a strumming heavy part, it's an awesome technique. And then you pan. I like to pan them like so the 440 hertz is in the middle, and on either side, they're progressively going more to the left and right as the further away from 440 they are.
So would one side be tunings that are going a little bit lower progressively, and the other side is tunings that are going a little higher progressively?
Exactly.
Okay, what a great trick, man. I love that one. Thanks for sharing that. Rockstars, you know what you're doing next. Do you also find it's hard to play those where it feels like it's out of tune while you're doing the overdub? Or what tricks did you find for making it easy and not like derailing because you're just like, this doesn't sound in tune?
I find that you just have to try, like when you're doing them one by one, like the first 3 or 4 don't sound, it sounds like you're recording things just out of tune, but you have to trust that once you layer them all together, it's going to sound great. So push through the first few ones where you're thinking, this guy's just giving me terrible advice and I've wasted 5 hours tuning my guitar, and you'll get there.
That's amazing, man. I love that you put 5 hours into a guitar part like that methodically.
Maybe it's
so when you're using contact mics, what are some lessons you learned about how to stick that to the guitar effectively? Because doesn't that make a big difference too? Like it'll really mess with its ability to pick up the tone if it's not solidly on there.
Yes. Number one thing I learned was don't stick them to guitars that you really care about, because it just leaves residue and it's hard to get off. But then once you're past that, don't stick them anywhere that could interfere with how you play guitar. So like I had one on the back, like the kind of bottom back of the guitar. But then anytime I moved with my fabric of my clothing against the back of the guitar body, you'd hear that fabric so loud. So the best place I've currently found is to have it kind of where you would almost, some guitars have like acoustic guitars have inbuilt volume and tone knobs, like in the sound hole, either up and just inside or down and just inside, because it seems for the most part, you're not messing with that area with your fingers or any fabric of clothing. And that it's definitely a noisy pickup and it's not going to sound good on its own, but blended in, it's very interesting.
That's cool. Well, now, of course, Harry Nilsson and John Lennon probably would have just done the part naked, so problem solved more quickly there.
That's probably, yeah. If you do end up sticking it there, get naked and you're probably good.
Yeah, I think Brian Cook, when he was on the show, talked about doing something similar to with contact mic, if I remember correctly. And then also, I had done some experimenting with this in the past, and I was trying to figure out where to put it on an electric guitar, because that was a Frank Zappa trick as well, was to have, so on a typical acoustic guitar pickup, there's a variety of kinds, but one of them is the piezo pickup. It's actually like it's microphonic, it's a contact mic, and I think it's typically placed underneath the bridge, and that gives you that kind of bright, DI sound for acoustics. But Frank Zappa used to do that with his electric and blend it in, and I tried doing that, and it was kind of tricky to figure out where to put it. But I think one of the things we also did was we just used like a spring clamp from the garage, for doing wood building or something, and just kind of physically clamped it to the headstock, and that cool. Kind of sort of worked sometimes too.
That's
no glue.
Yeah, that's probably a better move.
Yeah, but I suppose if you really found a spot you liked and it was a guitar that you were willing to donate to this, you could literally glue it on there and just have a permanent one ready to go.
Especially for if I have some cheap kind of acoustics that are in bad shape but have a kind of character to them, for something like that where you're willing to just make it an experimental guitar, it's worth doing, just having as an option.
Yeah. Now, what about miking the acoustic? What are some things you've learned about what kind of mics? I mean, you talked about some of the mics you've got. So you said you had the Vanguard, which is a large diaphragm. You've got this Singular, which is a large diaphragm now, and then the 441, which is a dynamic.
Yeah.
It's like the precursor to the 421, right?
Yes. I find that it all depends on the song I'm going for and the sound I'm going for with the song. But for the most part, miking it, I kind of noticed that I love how it sounds, the guitar sounds for me when I'm playing it. So I mess around, but most of the time it's like facing the 12th fret roughly. I'm not that close to it as to get like boomy frequencies in it. And it's kind of a little bit higher than traditionally it would be. And it's pointing down almost. It just sounds more natural to me. Like that's how I'm hearing it a little bit more so than right in front of it.
Right. So you're usually judging the sound of the guitar by what you're hearing in the headphones at that moment.
Right.
And so you learn to just trust some sense of, I mean, I guess if it sounds weird in your headphones, then you can't really play the part. So that doesn't help. But
Right.
do you sometimes find that, you go listen to it later and you're like, that's not what it sounded like to me in the headphones?
Yeah, I was having that issue quite a lot with small diaphragm condensers. I could just never get it to sound like I had envisioned it. And so I just don't tend to use those at all. I just find the guitars that are too bright, I just find troublesome.
Have you tried the double mic trick yet, where you take your large diaphragm, find the sweet spot, but you also have a small diaphragm, right next to the pickup diaphragm on there, and then you just record that as well, where you can blend it back later?
I haven't. I honestly like having just like a mono recording of the acoustic, and I also do tend to like move a little bit when I'm playing, and I found it a little bit more troublesome with two mics, dealing with me moving around and the volume shift and everything. So I just tend to go, I mean, I probably could achieve better results, but I tend to just go one mic and the piezo thing.
Yeah. So in the thing I'm describing, the second mic would literally be right next to the other one. So it's almost like they're both the same mic. So you get the phase lock that way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that was something we learned when we were talking about how Tom Petty recorded his guitars, was this double mic trick. So
cool.
I actually got a video for it too. I don't do it all the time because, to be honest, a lot of the times in the studio, getting rolling is more important than getting some kind of wacky thing. But it's one of the lovely things about recording yourself is you can take however much time you want to do to set up a really unique, creative sound.
Right.
I find it's a challenge when you record other people because you're like, I need to just say I'm ready for you right now because they're probably ready to play right now.
I like that. I do like that a lot, especially doing things by myself, having the chance to like try something that's a complete waste of time and doesn't work out. I'm not letting anybody down by doing that. And then whatever I do find that works, I can bring to other people knowing that it's a successful technique.
Now tell us a little bit about the sound of your room. Did you put up acoustic treatment? Have you explored that kind of stuff? Did you decide that's the stupidest thing ever and blow it all off? What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Probably sacrilege, but I have some big panels on wheels that came from the Village Studios here in LA that they were giving away. And
are those the same villagers that we talked about in the beginning of your podcast?
Those are different ones, unfortunately. And I honestly just never use them. I find that when I do use them, things sound a bit cleaner, but I love the sound of rooms, even if they're ugly. And I love the different rooms in this house. And so I got like a 100-foot snake that I can run around to every room in this house, like the kitchen and the bathroom and everything. And I just love how the rooms sound as they are. I love stepping away from the microphone, sometimes putting it in Omni to just get that room sound, even if it's not like technically the cleanest and best way to record. I find that there's some character there. So in terms of soundproofing and treating this room, I'm probably doing the worst job at that. I have not done anything.
Well, what's fascinating to me as I go through this too, is there is a difference between, while we grapple with which hat we're wearing, whether we're performing or whether we're engineering, that applies to rooms as well, I've found. So for example, what makes a lot of sense in my mix room as a way to treat the space so that the speakers play back properly for me might sound good on a microphone on an instrument in that room, and it might not. And then what actually sounds totally wacky for a listening space might sound great for an instrument or a voice because it becomes part of the instrument. So for example, the sound of a room in a house where you can hear the echo in there can become a signature part of the sound of an acoustic guitar, or even an amp playing in that space, or your voice, or a drum hitting. So it becomes a tricky conundrum. You kind of have to decide, what are you up to in that moment? Right. And it's one of the things that I also think is really cool about portable recording devices is that you can go to wherever the sound of the space is and record that instrument there or record a whole song there.
Yeah.
What are some things? Do you sometimes do portable recordings? You said you've got a laptop to record to, or you've got a desktop? Like, what do you use for all your Reaper stuff?
I've got actually a MacBook M1, a MacBook Air, and that seems to do it for me. I would love to have like a dedicated studio computer, but I like being able to move around easily, and so this MacBook has never let me down.
So do you take an interface with you and sometimes go record in all these different locations? I guess in your house, you said you just run your 100-foot snake out and that gives you your headphones and your mic.
Yeah, that does it for the house. I haven't, apart from like dedicated live sessions where I'm recording in other spaces and filming there, then I'll take an interface out with me. But for the most part, I'm here at the house.
Now, how do you control the MacBook, which is back in the 100 feet away in the other room, if you're going to record yourself in a faraway space in the house?
I am fortunate enough to have my wife, who's also an amazing musician and engineer, and so for the most part, she can help me out and be in this room and hit record or get levels or whatever it is, or the other way around.
OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. The OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot-swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, a dedicated display port, and an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Okay, cool. So I'll share a tip that works for me in the studio too, because like I said, my control room sounds great for the speakers, but the other spaces in the studio can sound great for recording. And so when you're done with your MacBook Air and you get another computer to be the studio computer, your MacBook Air is the perfect double for a screen share remote control. So you can actually carry that with you to where the microphone is, and just over the local Wi-Fi that you have in your house, in your studio, you can screen control the studio computer really easily. That's one of the really nice features of working on a Mac right now. And I'm sure probably whatever you're using, if you're on Windows too, there's probably some other device that will let you do that. But that's such a simple workflow. And I remember when I first built my studio, I think Matt Mahaffey was actually the one who told me about being able to do some version of that in his studio. But back then you had to get this app called Timbuktu and link it all up, and it kind of worked, and sometimes it kind of didn't. And it's pretty fascinating. But that's kind of a nice hack, because if you can just go wherever you want and still control the computer, it really helps.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Are you studied in music theory and stuff like that? Or are you somebody who just kind of figured out how to play guitar and just you followed your ear to where the chords sounded cool?
When I was learning guitar and singing, definitely just by ear and some lessons. But since going to Berklee, studied on music theory for sure. And I really enjoy it a lot, and knowing that kind of thing and analyzing what I'm playing. And I feel like it also, to a degree, allows me to like unlock new ways of thinking, in terms of if I'm stuck and not able to find a chord progression or a certain chord within a progression, I can kind of refer to music theory to figure that out.
What's some of the most useful music theory for those of us who might be strumming chords on a guitar, singing melodies, and figuring out how to make songs like yours, how deep does the music theory need to get to be useful?
It doesn't need to get that deep. I think probably the most useful thing is just learning modes and learning chords and scales. I mean, the most basic thing is probably learning scales, and then you just know, like, okay, these are the chords I'm strumming. This must be in the key of A, and therefore I can access all these other chords that are still in the key, or I can access this batch of chords that are in a related key or in a modal version of the key I'm in. And that stuff, it doesn't take too much brain power and is very useful.
So the modal stuff informs you about what chords might work, or do you use that as far as composing and melodies a lot?
For the most part, I'm using that for chords and relationships between chords.
Right. So it might help you figure out, like, oh, what happens if I go to this chord? And you're like, oh, wow, that'd make a cool bridge or pre-chorus or something like that.
Right, exactly. But also at the same time, so many, if not most of the best songs ever have no music theory behind them. So
yeah,
definitely not.
And they might only have 3 chords.
Right. They might even have 1 chord.
I'm trying to think of Me and My Arrow has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chords in it, I think.
Yeah. And Chain, 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 whatever that song is, I think is only C minor the whole way through. So
nice.
they're doing fine.
All right, cool. Do you write lyrics first, and is journaling a part of your process? How do you balance the lyric side of what you do with the musical side?
I met this guy at a writing camp I was in Lubbock called Steve Gary, and he has a song called Dusty Old Book of Words. And the concept is he has like a little chest, and inside he's just got words that he's heard and phrases he's heard. And he just puts them in there. And then if he's in need of inspiration, he refers back to that and sees what he's got. So in my notes app on my phone and computer, I have dusty old notes of words. And anytime I hear something in a movie, out and about, in my own head, I'll just pop it in there. And that I've found is super useful to just like refer back to if I'm in need of either lyric ideas to advance a song or to even start off a song. I have like a bank of phrases and words and sayings that I've found interesting.
That's great. So I've been doing that too. And I love that because I'll hear something and I'll think, oh my God, that's great. It's my brain works in weird ways. Sometimes I hear people say a natural phrase, like we're having a conversation and somebody just says something about getting up and getting through traffic to get to the thing where we met each other at the whatever it was. And somehow to me, I'm like, oh my God, that's a whole song lyric right there. It's like a whole verse or chorus. And I'll try and write those things down, but I'm not always sure about the best way to reuse it. So it's cool to hear you say that it can just be this pool of inspiration. Do you find that you start there to do a song, or do you find that you start in a more immediate moment and then you go there to just kind of mix it up?
Yeah, I think I start maybe with something that just pops into my brain, or just sitting down and intentionally humming and saying gibberish until something comes out. And then that'll usually get me like one verse or one chorus. And then to tackle any of the other lyrics, I'll refer back to this list and see if anything is somewhat relevant with the theme that I'm developing. And I've used things that are really old that I've had written down that I've thought I would never have a use for, and 4 years later, it's been the perfect phrase for this song that I've written. So
that's great, man. That's great. Well, we love talking about songwriting on the podcast. Chris King, who's been on the show, is a bandmate of mine and longtime friend. The concept of poetry scores, where you take poems and either literally, word for word, turn it into song, or just grab the phrases that make sense and put them into songs, is fun too. But I like, a lot of what Chris has done is borrowed phrases from other poems or from things, experiences in the art museum and things, and then, recompiles it into song. And it is a great skill, what you're talking about too, where you put all those bits back together, but there is a process to it. Like, even if we just start doing that, like you still have to figure out, like, okay, how do I actually do something with this stuff? So it's like building a studio. You can be like, I'm so excited, I'm building a studio. I finally built a studio. Or for me, I'm like, I just built my 10th studio. This time I'm going to really do it, and then you're like, oh crap, what do I do next?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about like that spark of inspiration for the, oh crap, what do I do next?
Can I take a second on that one?
Sure.
Okay. Let me think about that.
Dun, 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 dun. I'll drop a marker. Okay. We might edit this out.
I got you. Okay. So something that I've done a few times when I'm just like at a point where I have nothing, because I've been in a relationship for 7 years now and married for 3. And like a lot of songs are inspired by heartbreak, but when there's no heartbreak going on, it's hard to kind of like channel that energy, which creates a lot of good songs. So sometimes I am just stuck with what to write about. So I'll often refer to a book that I have lying around. There's a few tactics I like. I have a few photo books by photographers, and I'll open them up and I'll look through them and I'll find a photo that strikes me and I'll try to write a song about what I feel the photo is depicting. Maybe it's, a lot of them are like New York street photography books from maybe the 80s. And there'll be like these just weird people in weird situations. And I'll just try and imagine what's going on and write a story around them. And then maybe afterwards edit it to make it a little bit more relevant to me, maybe not. Or just straight up getting a book and finding interesting lines in it and seeing how those can be made a little bit more rhythmic and turning those into song. And one of my recent songs, well, not recent, but a song I released in 2021 called I Want to Die with My Blue Jeans On.
Yes.
I was asked to, there was an Andy Warhol exhibition of rare photos coming through LA, and I was asked to perform during the exhibition. And so I thought it would be really cool if I wrote a song using Andy Warhol quotes. So I looked up famous Andy Warhol quotes, and I Want to Die with My Blue Jeans On was one of them. And so I kind of built a song around what that might have meant to me. And then my invitation to play at the show was revoked. But
you got a song out of it.
I got a song out of it. And the crazy story with that song is that a few months after I released it, I got a Facebook message from a guy, Paul, who said, I'm a Swedish filmmaker and I'm making a documentary about essentially miners who have died with their blue jeans on and denim hunters who are going out to retrieve this denim from mines, which is now like rare denim, and selling it for, and they wanted to use the song, and they had just been looking up songs about blue jeans. And I'd never had a placement in TV or film before that, and I'd always been told, make sure the lyrics are generic as possible so that they can be used over anything. Don't name any specific activities, places, things. Just make it like energetic or love or happy or sad. And so then all of the music that I'd made like that never got a placement, but the song about dying with your blue jeans on got a placement in a documentary about people dying with their jeans on. Yeah.
What a story. Wow. I mean, like, what a bizarre even concept. I'm trying to even picture it, but hopefully we'll just get to see the movie and it'll all make sense to me at that point.
The movie is really great movie.
That's exciting, man. Now that song in particular has got great drum loops and really cool distorted vocal echoes and stuff like that going on. Talk a little bit about your production for that track.
So I had found that a lot of the time I was recording everything but the drums and then sending it off to a friend of mine who was a drummer to get recordings, and his drums would be fantastic, but I wouldn't have played things perfectly in time because I wasn't starting out with drums, and I would be then frustrated that I'd have to redo everything else because things were just not clicking in place as if a band was in a room together. And so what I've started to do as of the last few years is either build drums with samples that I've gathered. I like to use a lot of Foley, so like camera shutters and random sounds from nature to build like a drum kit. and layer that with probably just a regular like drum sample. Or I'll get this guy, Louis, who's my friend who drums, to send me just loops that he's made up from scratch. And I'll build my song around that. And I've been trying to put a lot of emphasis into the drum production and making it interesting. And I found that with Blue Jeans, I just wanted the song to feel like a road trip and just have one kind of, even the chords, it's like a 3-chord pattern that just loops over and over again throughout the whole song. And the drums are the same. It's just one drum pattern that loops over across the whole song. And that really added to that feeling of kind of it being like a journey, like a train almost. And that's what I did with that one.
That's great, man. And then that actually jumps me forward to another record that you produced by your friend Juniper, Like You Love Me. I feel like that's an example of the drums and the rhythm section being created out of these percussive elements, which makes me think of like, I don't know, Phil Spector productions or something where you've got like these distinct sonic percussive sounds and big reverbs, and it gets assembled as a groove for a song, but it's not the traditional drum kit kind of thing. Is that accurate for you? And do you want to tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, so your friend Juniper is my wife, Danielle, and she actually produced all of those songs. I kind of came in at the end and added some layers of things, but Excellent. The majority of it is hers, and we mixed it together. We worked together a lot. But yeah, I think that was a similar kind of process where it was like building a drum foundation using sounds that are interesting. I remember when I was in Berklee, there was a guy who was preaching that he would always layer his snare drums with the sound of cabbage being torn in half. And I thought, I don't know what he's talking about, but now I get it. So finding sounds like that, Splice is obviously very useful for finding other people's samples, but also freesound.org is a good website for just downloading random free sounds. And just finding weird things, or even I've gone out a few times with a field recorder. Back in London, I did this in Hampstead Heath, which is like a big kind of park forest thing. And I was just going around with a field recorder, a cheap Zoom field recorder, and just sampling like leaves being crunched or me hitting sticks with sticks and incorporating that into more traditional kick and snare and hi-hat samples, I find brings a very interesting textural element.
Yeah, that's great, man. And then are you familiar with the iOS app called Koala?
No.
That's a great one. I think you would dig that. And we've talked about it on the show a little bit, but I learned about it when I was at AAS in New York, just reading a magazine. I think I just picked up Keyboard Magazine and there it was. But it's a really cool sampling app that you can immediately go around and like grab these sounds and it puts them on the keypads and you can compose very, very quickly and easily and intuitively. So that's worth checking out for that stuff too.
That's awesome. And I guess that's also something that I find so useful is that the voice memo app on an iPhone or whatever phone you have is just like the easiest little sampling tool. And oftentimes,
it sounds great too.
It sounds ridiculously good, scarily good. I remember I was in a wooden cabin not too long ago and that rain started coming down and there was just like the sound of rain on this like handmade wooden cabin and on the windows. And so I just left my iPhone recording that for 5 minutes. And then now that's like the background noise in one of my songs and stuff like that's so useful.
Yeah. Now, when do you go through the old writing and the voice memos? I know you mentioned the dusty old notes as sort of, you kind of gave us an idea of when that's useful. What about the voice memos? And then on top of that, just, I hear you describing these things and some of them I do in different capacities and I love all that stuff, but ultimately it's not much more. It's kind of like saying the recording, if you don't find a way to make money out of it, then it's just a hobby, which is fine. You can choose to do a hobby or you can choose to make a living at it. But with the songwriting too, it's like you can, all these bits and pieces and creative inspired bits you can do, but if you don't put them into song, then it's just a bits hobby or something, So, so part of my question is, when do you sit down and do your writing? How do you, I'm going to just be honest, I'm super jealous. When do you make all these cool songs, man?
In terms of incorporating those sampled sounds, I'll tend to, if I can, and I get very lazy about it, organize them immediately as soon as I have recorded them, give them a name, put them on my computer, put them in a sample folder. I have some that's like recordings of overhearing people talking, recordings of soundscapes, rain, whatever. And then I have a very easy way to kind of, if a song is missing some kind of atmospheric sound, I can refer back to that folder and it's organized for me and ready to go. So yeah.
So because it's voice memo on your phone, does it automatically show up on the computer, or do you have to come plug your phone into the computer and do this whole transfer thing?
It should automatically come over, but for some reason mine doesn't, so I end up having to. I'm sure it's probably a simple click of a button.
You're just putting in the hard work, man. That's it.
Yeah. So I tend to send it over to myself.
That's cool. Yes, the voice memo sounds really good. It didn't always sound really good, but it seems to sound exceptionally good these days. That Koala app also has that quality where I feel like when you record something on there, it just plays back sounding really good, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then I like your idea of organizing this stuff and giving it names. And so you just put them in folders on the computer somewhere, just people talking, rain, clicks, and smacks.
The other day, so like 2 years ago, I walk a dog with my wife every morning for money. And I was sitting in the car waiting for her to get the dog and bring it to the car. And there was a guy walking by on the phone, shouting down the phone. And one of the things he said was, he said like, "You got to stop that. You made me think you died." And I was just like, I have to record this guy. So I pulled out my voice memo. And the other day I was writing with a friend of mine, and it was like a very like punk rock song. And at one point there's a break of silence. And I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect moment to use this "You made me think you died" clip. So now the song is just perfectly tied together by like these aggressive like don and then it breaks and he's like, "You made me think you died," and comes back in. And I find it's just like nice to use those things.
Well, who knows? Maybe if he's a listener, maybe if you're out there listening to this podcast, you'll give us a shout and let us know it was you.
I'll throw you some dollars.
There's so much cool stuff that's just out there in the world to grab, and the phone is the ultimate easiest way to get it like that. I'll be honest, sometimes I'm a little frustrated. Sometimes the phone is a little too damn slow to get the thing, Yeah. Even the one thumb photo option never seems to work as quickly as I need it to. And I used to use an app called iTalk because it just had one big fat button on it. You just open it and just hit it. But boy, do I wish you could instantly record things. And on that note, it's almost worth having like one of those digital voice memo recorders where it is a one button to get things more quickly. But really the app does voice memos pretty quick for doing that. And collecting it all is great. When you're writing with other people, talk a little bit about the experience of co-writing. I love the idea of collaborating with people. I'd much rather collaborate than think that collaborating is not a good idea ever. So what do you feel like you've either learned or are practicing or have seen other people do about, calling things co-writes and how to credit stuff and when it's appropriate, when it doesn't matter? I mean, I know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot like you have to be a legal expert, but what's the stuff that you feel like is helpful?
In terms of co-writing, first of all, from like an emotional standpoint, when I first was co-writing with people, I have very strong musical opinions, and I would struggle to kind of let go of what I thought was the right way to do things or a good lyric or whatever. But then I've just got to realize that people have different tastes, and giving it like a badge of co-writing implies that it's not just my opinion out there or my thought out there. So a big part of it took quite a few years to just let go of like ego about what I would be putting out into the world. In terms of splits and stuff, I tend to just say that if we've done it together, it's just 50-50. I just like to keep it easy that way. It's not like I'm making millions off of my songs anyway. So I'm happy that whoever's contributed, we just split it evenly. I feel like that keeps everybody happy, and the relationship with people is probably more important than the difference in percentage.
That's a good tip. Just remembering that the value of relationships might be higher than the value of a song, or just, the money that comes with that. Obviously, right. There's always stories out there of like super hit songs and everything like that. But honestly, if the super hit problem, if you're ever facing it, you're probably hopefully getting enough to not have to really stress over that. Yeah. So let me accompany that. Tell us, to the extent that you want to share, tell us what your experience is with making an income from doing the music you do at this point. Where have things worked? Where do they not work? Where do you think they ought to be working? All that stuff.
I definitely have found from my own personal music project, like releasing things online, minimal income, not livable whatsoever at this stage.
Where would it even come from? It would just be you release it through a DistroKid or something, and then
streaming. I was
in.
DistroKid for a while now. I'm with AWOL, a different company, but doing the same thing. And so that, for the most part, is not bringing any significant income. What I've been doing since I've been in LA is kind of just trying to infiltrate my social circle as much as possible and offer things at first for free, with bearing in mind that it's an investment in my future work, and saying, hey, somebody will bring me a song and say, listen to this song I've made. And I'll say, I'd love to mix that for free. I'm not going to charge. And if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. And that has been a great way for me to kind of get my name out there within the group of people and their friends and their friends and their friends.
Plus, it's great practice for mixing.
It's great practice as well. But the majority of my income musically at the moment comes from engineering podcasts for the most part, and music videos my wife and I do a lot of, which has been really fun. That's another thing where we've just kind of been teaching ourselves along the way and done some for free or very cheap in exchange for having the chance to make mistakes and learn what to do and what not to do and how to work cameras and lights and everything. So right now my fingers are in tons of pies in terms of mixing, producing music.
That's videos. A great image, by the way. You should put that in your dusty old notes. My fingers are in tons of pies. I'm writing it down.
We run a live show, so we're kind of making little bits of money from all these various things that accumulate into probably like a minimum wage income at the end of the day.
Hey, you got to start somewhere. And I remember, I never had some high-paying gig doing what I do. It's always been an artist's wage for me, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to just keep doing what I'm doing over all these years. And then I feel like some of the smart things that I've learned, obviously anybody who's out there who would like to really make a killing at this, go for it. And there's plenty of things you can do that way. But if you set out with your career to make kind of an artist wage on it, just be smart with how you invest that money, that little bit that you've got, carefully accumulate, try and get yourself out of debt, all those things. And it really does add up over time into something that's pretty awesome.
And I think having the mindset as well that I would rather be happy, like money is not the goal. So I'd rather be happy doing what I enjoy doing. When money comes from it, that's great. Obviously, unless I'm in dire straits, but
well, now if you're in dire straits, you might be getting paid well.
Probably.
We just did an interview with Chuck Ainley where we were talking about dire straits. So literally just for 4 years. So that's great.
If I was in dire straits, that would be all right. But I'd rather be happy doing what I like and making enough to get by than doing something I don't enjoy just for the sake of having a Tesla.
Yeah, no, don't go beat up on my Tesla. But I did see that was one of the lyrics in your video, which was great, by the way.
I wouldn't mind a Tesla, but
Well, when you're in town, we'll go for a drive. Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low-profile A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. I agree with you. And for me, it's always a struggle because there are times where I think I wish I could have just not pursued income and job stuff, so that all I ever did every day was, write some songs and stuff. So before we go towards video production, because I do want to talk about that too, tell us a little bit more about, like, when do you carve out time to go into your studio and write, create, organize, go, work on a song, go look in a book for lyrics, all those cool things that we described. When do you tie it all together so that it's not just a creative collective hobby and you're making actual songs?
I think something important is at the moment I have a manager who helps a lot with this, but before I did, I would kind of treat it as a business and schedule out deadlines for myself and have a plan months ahead of time, knowing that I want to release this amount of music or work on this amount of music. So I'll carve out the time to do that and have deadlines that I have to meet and get in the studio. But the other thing is, if I spend too much time going in the studio without a plan and just trying to make things and maybe the creative energy isn't flowing, I get frustrated and burnt out on it. So I think whenever there's like the passion to do it, that's the time to do it, as opposed to making it too much of a job, because otherwise you start to associate it with negativity. And I think that's not good.
You want to associate it with productivity.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that passion is seasonal sometimes for you?
Very much so. I find sometimes I have absolutely zero desire to make music or be in the studio or fiddle with things, or pick up a guitar. But that has always seemed to fade away after however long that is, even if it's a month or 2 or 3. And I like to have, therefore, these other creative things like videos and event planning and whatever else to be able to switch my mind over to something else. I think it's also like listening to podcasts and listening to music. You can tire yourself out on one or the other, but the other one's always there to kind of give your brain something new to think about, and that's very helpful.
Okay, great. Let's dive in and start talking about the video stuff. So now you referenced a little bit about making those Instagram videos in, what I'm guessing you were describing as the wrong way in Photoshop initially, or the hard way.
The hard way.
You're like, even your Spotify playlist. So Rockstars, just go over to Spotify, which is the playlist we've got for Fairhazel, and then watch some of these or listen to some of these tracks, and you'll notice that it's got the little video clip that plays, but your video clips are awesome. They're just like super creative and intriguing, and I always feel like I just got let into the cool part of the club, So talk a little bit about how you do that stuff. Maybe describe your evolution of understanding and learning how to do the video production and the creative graphical imagery part of what you do. Give us some inspiration for how we can start advancing ours.
For sure. I found a lot of joy in learning new softwares. So at the moment, Premiere Pro, Blender, the 3D modeling software, After Effects, Photoshop, those kinds of things. And
that's all part of the Adobe suite.
Everything apart from Blender, which is free, is part of the Adobe suite. But there's also alternatives to all of those, like DaVinci Resolve, that are free and just as good. And so I'll kind of pair up the desire to learn those softwares, which a lot of the times, if you are familiar with a DAW, a lot of the kind of workflow and ways of doing things is very easily applied over to these other video editing softwares. And I'll pair that with like just watching media that I love on YouTube and just trying to figure out how they do it. And YouTube is such an amazing resource, and podcasts, to like learn things. So
I'm addicted.
I'm addicted as well. Everything I've learned is probably from podcasts or YouTube. And my wife and we're on like a similar trajectory of what we know, and we're learning together. So it's useful to have somebody who can be behind the camera when I want to film something, or for me to be behind the camera when she wants to film something. But we don't have, we have lovely cameras. My dad's a photographer, and so he has a lot of surplus cameras. And so we have one of his cameras, and it's old in the scheme of cameras, but it's fantastic for us. And just to be able to fiddle around and do things for friends, especially friends who it's not like a huge, they don't have a music video budget and big stakes behind their music video. So you can just spend a day with them kind of messing around and learning things and seeing what works and what doesn't, and just experimenting. And I find experimenting from a place of not really knowing everything technical, it's the same in the studio, often yields some results that are really interesting and creative.
Yeah. Do you sometimes find or struggle with learning too many things that aren't necessarily useful yet? Or do you find that it's okay to learn, to geek out and go down a rabbit hole on something, even if you don't know what you're going to do with it yet?
I think it's all useful. Sometimes I'll definitely, like with Blender, the 3D modeling program, I spent months really trying to figure out how to 3D model. And then one day I woke up and I thought, when am I ever going to need this? What am I doing this for? But I was able to create some cool kind of assets from my music, and I'm able to create some cool like 3D titles for friends and their artist projects. And so I feel like it's logged in the back of my brain, and it will be useful one day, and it wasn't wasted time. So I just enjoy the process of learning things like that, and hopefully that's not wasted.
When are you going to go learn Unreal Engine?
I think that might be a step too far for me. That would be great, but
imagine making your music videos that way.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's probably a lot of work. Okay, what was I going to say about that too? So Blender is the 3D modeling. A shout out to your dad, who I'm sure is listening to this right now. As I recall, when we first got together to go to NAMM, your dad sent me a really nice email saying thanks so much for including Hugh. So that was yes. Thanks so much for sending your awesome kid over to America so we can, make music and videos with them.
Yeah, my mom and dad are very supportive, and I appreciate that a lot.
That's great. All right. So let's see. What do I want to ask you about? So let's talk more about the video stuff. For those of us who are making music and we think, geez, we really probably should accompany this with a video, how can we do something cooler than just, airplay guitar along to it and do something that looked like a bad Zoom call during 2020 for our music video?
I think, first of all, understanding what you have, even if that's a phone with a camera, and knowing the tools you have available to you, and then planning everything around that, and not don't come up with a Michael Bay level concept that you're going to film on your iPhone. Is that the
Transformers guy?
I think so, yeah. I don't know, just pulled him out of the air. But don't come up with a concept that goes beyond. Don't set yourself up to fail and set yourself up to be disappointed. I think sometimes the simplest ideas are the best. And there's a ton of resources right now. Like PSpace is a great website where you can rent spaces and movie studios, and not movie studios, like filming rooms and studios with nice white walls or black walls or whatever, and carving out a little bit of a budget to invest in making that happen is really cool. And also, nature is a free resource to film in, and I'm sure wherever you live, there's some really interesting places to film in. But watching music videos and looking at the artists you admire and what they make and trying to copy that, not directly, but just taking inspiration from that and seeing what they're doing, especially in their early days when they definitely didn't have a budget to work with.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's a smart way to do it. And I think a good reminder to us as we think about copying things people have done is don't worry about it. It's not going to be the same anyway.
Right.
You're not going to get that same thing.
Right.
But in the same way, I always remember that if you're at a fine arts school, you know, they'll take the class and they'll go to the art museum and everybody sits around and tries to paint the classics. You know, don't splatter your paint. You're in the art museum. But,
yeah,
you know, that's a great way to learn how to paint and copying mixes by using references and trying to do that. Matt Mahaffey, who's been on the show, told me way back when we were roommates and he was upstairs in his the studio. I'm trying to remember if he called the studio the Kraken, but he had a fish called the Kraken right next to his production rig. And he said somebody told him about, quote, demoing out songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would take some of the songs that he really liked and he'd just figure out how to recreate them. He'd play the parts himself and everything, like a cover, but in the studio. And I haven't done much of that, a tiny bit of that, but I've always thought that was a good idea too. But, you know, for video production, same idea, right?
Also, wherever you are in the world, going to events, going to like students' art displays, exhibitions, going to art exhibitions, going to people showing their films that they've made, no matter how small, it's a great way to meet people who might be like where you are in the process of engineering and making music. They're in the same level of video production or directing or animation, and they need you as much as you need them. So meeting people, going out to events and kind of trading, will you make a music video for me and I'll provide music for your short film, et cetera, or whatever you can. Making relationships with other up and coming creative people is a great way to not have to rely solely on yourself to come up with everything.
Yeah, that's a good tip. When we did the stereo sessions, which was actually what you emailed me about in the first place in 2019, that was having bands come into the studio and we were doing tons of video production. And I like you, I got frustrated with trying to do, quote, high-end production. Because actually the more high-end and the more expensive it was, the worse it looked.
Right.
And so finally I was just like, can't we just do this with iPhones, you know? And so we started trying it that way. And I just figured the things that make iPhone not hi-fi can be exploited to make it look even more abstract and, you know, expressionist, like a painting. And one of the tricks for getting more cameras into the picture was just like, oh, well, if we got 6 bands that are all waiting to play, everybody just bust out your iPhone and become a camera person for the videos, for the band who's playing right now.
Yeah.
So like
Absolutely.
Getting people together that way. For recording sessions in the studio, that's one of the things I've been really toying around with was doing songwriting sessions. So if I want to record myself doing more songs and I wish I had a band in the studio, it's like invite other people who play the other instruments who also have some songs they want to do. And now everybody, you know, on one session, each does a song in a day or something like that. It's a cool way to collaborate on the productivity.
Yeah, collaboration really unlocks, you get to learn from other people's methods and exchange kind of tips with them. And it's great.
And then when it comes to video, another thought I had was one of the tough lessons to learn at the beginning, and I try to remind this of interns, is like, by the way, video is always about background, just like, you know, real estate is about location, as they say. So when you're shooting something on a video, the thing that you're not supposed to pay attention to, you should pay a lot of attention to, because there's probably some stupid distracting element in the shot that's screwing it all up.
Absolutely. And also I've found, especially with iPhone cameras, like a cheap light off of Amazon turns an iPhone camera into a far higher quality tool than an expensive camera with no lighting. So just like investing in small things, like I got these 6 big softbox lights for, I think it was $50. That has made my iPhone camera incredibly useful. So yeah, don't feel limited by what you have.
Yeah, so the soft boxes are only $50, but the storage place you have to rent to get them the hell out of the way when you're not using them is like $100 a month.
That is true.
No, I know. The whole lighting thing is really fun to discover and learn for video production. And, I've thought about it in the context of videos for teaching videos. And I've actually been spending a lot of energy recently relearning that stuff and setting that stuff in my studio. But it'd be really fun to think about in the creative context, like, oh, how to light something for creating a video to go along with your music video. Now, talk about some of the basic things. So like, educate us on like, okay, let's say we've got a song, we've recorded the song, we got an iPhone, we want to sing along to it and play our instruments to it in some different locations. What are some fundamental elements we need to remember? Like, how do we even play along to the song if we're, outside in the yard somewhere or in the forest or in a train station?
A cheap Bluetooth speaker is essential to be able to, an iPhone speaker is not going to cut it as soon as you're outdoors trying to play along.
Because the camera's not right in your face necessarily and you can't hear it.
Right. Even if you have a second iPhone, placing it close enough to you to be able to hear will bring it into the shot. And so I find like any cheap Walmart, whatever Bluetooth speaker that can get loud enough that you can play along effectively. Also, when you're playing along, I find actually playing and singing out loud as opposed to just mouthing the words makes it 100 times more realistic than if you're just like mouthing along. And having something loud enough where you can sing over it and still hear it is essential. Even an AirPod, if you have long enough, or a little earphone.
Like earbuds, the wireless earphones.
If you have long enough.
Of course, those are in the shot, unless it's on one ear on your left ear and the shot is the right side of your head, right?
Right, exactly. And for the most part, that's if I'm just doing something with my iPhone, that's all I'll take out with me. A battery pack, because it's the worst thing to get somewhere that you've planned, hike up into the mountains, and then realize that you're on 10% and your whole plan's ruined. So just those kinds of things that are not fun to think about, but definitely are essential.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Okay, so I'm going to clarify that a little bit and tell me if I'm correct. So you might go out, maybe you've got one other person with you. One person has an iPhone and they're shooting the video of you. And then you also have your iPhone with a Bluetooth speaker that might allow you to, put it in your back pocket while you do the shot, but the speaker's out of the camera, down on the ground next to you, blasting up at you.
Yeah.
So don't think that, well, actually, not even don't think about it, but you probably can't have your friend both shoot the video and be playing the song for
No.
you at the same time, because the phone won't do that. So you're going to need a couple of phones probably, right?
Yeah, definitely. Or an iPod or whatever you've got.
Okay. Do you ever try and shoot the video yourself when you're creating these things? And do you find it's helpful with a tripod, or is that kind of a recipe for, um, utter frustration, and the only smart move is to just have somebody else be a camera person?
Most of the time, if I'm at home, especially, I'm doing it myself. With a proper camera, it's too frustrating because you're going back and forth and then you're out of focus because you've moved a little bit, and that process becomes a headache. But with the iPhone, I've got this thing that was probably $10 where it's like two goosenecks. One can hold an iPhone and one has a little ring light on it, and it can clip to a desk. And that's just the most useful thing. It's clipped onto my studio desk right here.
Okay.
And that just allows me to, whenever I'm recording, to just slot my iPhone in there and record myself, and then I can edit it afterwards. Another thing I found was that trying to record myself doing the actual takes of something became incredibly frustrating, because either something would happen with the camera, my storage would run out halfway through, and then I'm sabotaging the audio take. So I like to just do everything with no camera and then put up an iPhone and play back to it and pretend I'm doing it for the first time. Well, not pretend, but do it, make it look like I'm doing it live. And that takes away like an element of frustration.
Yeah, no, these are the kind of tips that I think are really helpful too, because I agree with you. I've done a lot of stuff where I captured the actual performances on video. One of the first videos I ever created was actually for Roswell Pro Audio. And I thought, I want to make a video about this mic today. So how am I going to do that? And I was like, oh, I'll write a quick song about Roswell. So I made up this goofy song about the microphone, which is, again, a testament to what you said, which is like, pick a thing and write a song about it. And it was easier that day. If I had to write about, life without heartbreak, I don't know what I'd come up with. But, so write a song. And then I was like, all right, I had an intern in the studio and I said, I'm going to run around and record this song. Just follow me. And with everything I do, follow me with the iPhone. And I ended up with 6 hours of footage that I had to sort through to try and line it all back up and find the right clips and everything and assemble it into a video. And it was an enormous amount of work. That video is called One Mic to Rule Them All, ? So if you want to look for it on YouTube Rockstars, that's it. But it was fun to do. It did turn out good. But I agree with you. I think just shooting, when it comes to video stuff, if you can just go for the actual one shot as quick as you can and just get it, it's much easier to move forward than get stuck with a whole bunch of stuff. I've also found, I don't know whether this applies to the videos you've been making, but if I'm going to roll the video, a lot of times I find it's more useful to roll one video and do everything I need in the one video, and then just have this single file that I have to keep track of, than it is to have a whole bunch of bits and pieces of starts and stops. It gets really, before you know it, you're confused and you don't know where anything is.
Absolutely. And the other thing I find, especially on iPhone, doing iPhone videos, is if you are doing it in multiple videos and not just one take, which is also a good idea, as soon as you've butchered a take and you're not going to use that video, take the 2 seconds to just delete that, so that when you're going back and opening up the photos and you're looking at all these videos, you don't have 7,000 videos of you and then you have to think, oh, which one was the good take? You just have one left.
Yeah, come to one of my daughter's soccer games when I'm shooting, trying to get the perfect clip of a goal, maybe being scored this time, that you'll see just how it can be a little challenging to delete those before the next one's shooting. But I know what you mean. Okay, so let's jump to the end here, Hugh. This has been a blast, dude. And Rockstars, thank you for sticking with us through this stuff. If you have further questions, we'll make sure that you can reach out to us afterwards too. But let's fire through these jam questions as fast as we can. Does that sound? Do you have time for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. When you started out in recording, what was holding you back?
I think thinking that I needed better, more expensive gear to make something worthwhile. But I've realized, like, even now, having better and more expensive gear, it like we were talking about the voice memos, like if we're talking about music, like a good song, you can hear a voice memo recording of an amazing song, and that'll hit you emotionally enough that's all you need. You don't need a U87 and Neve preamps and everything else. And so don't get hung up on thinking that you need more than you have. Like, that will come over time, but what you have right now is totally sufficient.
Awesome. How about some of the best advice you remember receiving?
The best advice I remember receiving, I think, is that nobody listening to a song you've put out is going to be thinking whatsoever about what gear you've used, what microphones you've used, what plugins you've used on it. Like, nobody, even people, for the most part, who are audio engineers as well, they're listening to the song and they're not listening to the fact that you used Logic's stock EQ.
Yeah.
So just don't let that get in the way of the creative process.
I don't remember who the quote was attributed to, but it was somebody who said, nobody ever walked out of a record store whistling the sound of the console.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
All right. How about a favorite hardware tool? Something physical that you either love having around or just something you think is cool that you would think the rock stars should know about?
I actually have a list for this one arranged from cheap to expensive.
Oh, yeah. Bring it.
So the cheapest is toilet paper, and toilet paper is amazing because if you take some toilet paper or anything like toilet paper at varying levels of thickness and you intertwine that in your guitar strings near the bridge, you can unlock these really interesting tones, muted tones, kind of sitar-esque tones sometimes. And just so, like, looking around the house and thinking, how can I use these things that I have in my recording? And so oftentimes I'll like thread toilet paper through my electric guitar and I'll get a really cool muted sound. So that's free, provided you use toilet paper, not a bidet. Then I don't know what to tell you.
Well, and if you get the toilet paper from somebody else's house, then it's free.
Then it's free. The other thing that is honestly one of my favorite things in the studio that I've discovered at NAMM the last time we were there last year, I think I was just wandering around on a little break, is this thing called the Cable Wrangler. Have you heard of that?
No, but what was that dude giving you breaks, man?
So the Cable Wrangler is $30. A visual would help. I have one here, but if you Google Cable Wrangler, it's like a system that can hold 12 cables, and they've got their own kind of ball and tie system. And it's just the easiest, most incredible way to organize cables that I've found. It's got a handle so you can bring it with you. You can throw it in the car. You can throw it across the room and no cables will go flying anywhere. And it keeps things perfectly organized. So the Cable Wrangler.
And so that's one handle, but you've got 12 mic cables with you?
Yeah, one handle, and it's got, it makes total sense when you see it, but describing it's hard. It's got 12 slots for cables and it comes with the system to tie them up, and it's easy.
Rock says if you could only see Hugh's hand gestures as he tries to explain 12 cables being wrangled. Okay, cool. Well, next time you're in Texas, we'll get deeper into that one. All right. So how about a favorite software tool for the studio? Something that you love using or that you're just real excited about?
Favorite software, I have a few plugins that I think probably a lot of people might not know about. Kazrog True Iron is a kind of summing emulation, like a hardware summing thing, and I throw it on the mix bus every time and it adds a certain magic. I think it's $30.
Great.
There's also Isotopes. I don't know, I think they're an Isotope company, Exponential Audio. R4 Reverb is my go-to reverb. There's also this plugin company called Hornet Plugins, and everything they have is like $10 or $20 or $5. And they have this one automatic EQ called 31 Mark II. And it just does like very subtle, I don't know if it's using like AI or whatever it's using, but it kind of auto EQs things. And I find that after I've mixed a song, if I put that on the mix bus and hit the auto EQ, it just adds like a finishing touch that's beautiful. Also, Analog Obsessions, that's my last thing on the software front. Analog Obsessions is one guy who makes plugins that are free on Patreon. You don't have to be a patron. You can just download them straight for free. And they're emulations, most of them, and they're all amazing. But one is called Cabin, and it's like a guitar cab emulation. And if I have a DI guitar and I'm too lazy to mic up an amp, and I just plug that in and I throw Cabin on, it's incredible.
That's awesome. I love it. Great tips. So, and there was 31 Mach 2, like the speed, or Mark, like M-A-R-K?
Mark, like M-A-R-K.
Okay, groovy. We'll write all those down, put them in there too. All right. How about a resource or a tip for the business side of doing this stuff?
For the business side, in terms of organization, two things come to mind. One is Backblaze, which is kind of a cloud backup service. I think it's $7 a month. And it just automatically backs up your computer and any hard drives you're plugging in and keeps them in their cloud thing, which you can access at any time, which kind of takes a level of worry away. Also, the WeTransfer desktop add-on is great because it sits at the top of your computer, I guess on a Mac, but probably on Windows too. And you can just drag files up into there and it creates a link. And it's an easy way of doing that.
And I guess the cool thing about using WeTransfer is you don't have to sort of hold on to it and fill up file storage, right? You're just sending it. And then once it's sent, you're done with it, right?
You're done, exactly. Yeah. Another online resource I love, just for purely entertainment, is, and I think I heard it through your podcast, is Audio Test Kitchen.
Yeah.
I just I can spend hours on there. If you don't know what it is, it's like they have, I think, 5 or 6 songs recorded, and they've used like these highly scientific conditions to ensure that everything is recorded with the exact same way. And they've got a locker of mics, and you can hear how everything's recorded. You can solo the instruments, or you can hear the full song on these different mics. And Alex, when he was on the podcast, explained it, obviously, because he's the one who made it, in a really fascinating way. But it's so fun to just listen to how all these different mics sound and realize that these cheapest mics only sound marginally worse than some of the amazing mics.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and again, you talk about our inherent obsession with wanting gear and more gear. That can be kind of a nice way to give that a little love without necessarily getting it just yet. You can just go listen to them all and sort of explore and everything.
Exactly.
Mics are fun. Having enough mics is also fun. All right, so I'll ask this one. I don't always, but this is sort of hypothetical. Let's imagine you ended up in a new city. Oh, wait a minute, you just did that, and you needed to have a simple setup for recording. You needed to meet and find people to work and make music with, and you needed to make ends meet. These are all things you've talked about a little bit already, but if you feel like tackling that question, go for it.
How I would do that?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I would go out to as many events as possible, open mics, other creatives, house shows, and just slowly build a community, learn from my friends. In terms of a setup, I think all you probably need is an interface and one microphone. I mean,
and a laptop is pretty handy these days. Yeah.
That'll do. My first record was just all on one microphone. I just recorded everything one by one with one mic, and I think that'll get you going.
Yeah. You can even get started with the songwriting just using the built-in mic. I mean, now with phones, that's all you even need. Got a whole studio on a phone. And Rockstars, if you're curious about using your phone as a studio, then you want to check out Studio Live Today and Pete Johns, his YouTube channel. He's been a guest on the show too. He just entirely focuses on composing and recording with iOS.
Cool.
All right. So last question, Hugh. You ready for it? Rockstars, ready. Thanks for hanging in there. I guess I'm all about epic podcast interviews these days. You did mention Joe Rogan. I mean, I don't know how long his go for, but they seem to go really long. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, Hugh, and AKA Fairhazel, and we're going to go fairly back in time, and you go back and find young Hugh, who's you're still pretty young, so I don't know how far. You don't go back too far because you won't be able to speak yet. And you're going to you tap yourself on the shoulder, and when you turn around, you're like, oh, what are you doing here, older Hugh? And you say, well, listen, younger Hugh, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day? And of course, you would have said all that in a cool British accent. But what advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I think to be confident in whatever I'm doing, not be embarrassed to try ideas that might fail. Because most of the time when I get into rooms with people who I perceive as more professional as me, they are guessing and trying things to the same level that I am. And if nobody really knows entirely what they're doing, then it should be a nice open space to just try things, see what works and see what doesn't, and don't feel any kind of insecurity that your ideas are not professional or good enough yet to try, and just be confident and go on.
So you're saying don't cancel yourself during the actual creative process?
Yeah, don't get too in your head, and definitely don't cancel yourself.
Nice, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out with us on Recording Studio Rockstars. A pleasure as always, my man. Let the rock stars know, where can they go find you online? Where should they go check out your coolest stuff? Of course, we have links in the show notes. You can go there, rock stars. But I would recommend maybe they go over to your Instagram or something too, right?
Instagram, yeah. If you want to go to my Instagram, which is Fairhazel_, or my TikTok, if TikTok is still alive by the time this comes out, that's a good place too. But all of my music is on Spotify, and if you could give that a listen, I would appreciate that greatly.
Yeah. And then just go to his website, fairhazelmusic.com. You got bunch of stuff there. And I love your the album cover, I Sold My Soul for Fairhazel. It just looks like an old 1950s political campaign button. It's great.
That's what I took it from. The Irishman. They had like a political button in there, and I took the design. Well, not took
That's
the design.
Great. That's
inspired
great.
Myself from it.
Rockstars, thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you want to know more about in the comments. And I think, Hugh, we should get together and do some sort of songwriting event.
That would be awesome.
I think that'd be really fun. So Rockstars, if you would love to be part of taking your creativity from wherever you're at now to an absolute next level, let us know, and we'll see if maybe we can put something together where we're bringing us all together in a place and we all leave with killer songs.
That sounds cool.
All right, man. Thanks, dude. I'll see you around the studio, dude.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: OWC, Lewitt, Adam Audio, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. And remember, at isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcasts and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.